My name is Lloyd F. Reese, and today we're here at Parker Center where we're talking to the chief of the Los Angeles Police Department, Bernard C. Parks. Chief Parks, we're talking about 116 years of protection, service, and color that the African Americans have been serving this wonderful city of Los Angeles. Now, Chief Park, what are your thoughts about that 116 years, sir?
Well, I think it's 116 years, but I think you have to think that in reality, the real history of the Los Angeles Police Department is fairly recent. When you think about Tom Bradley leaving the department in 1961, 62, because it was an unwritten statement that you could not rise to the rank of captain. And it's not until 69 you get your first captain, 75 your first commander. Those are major milestones that really began the real history of the department. And then assignments where people could work. Prior to the 60s, only in Newton, only in, quote, black areas. So there were sprinklings of people that worked in the department, but when you really think about the movement, the activity, and officers getting some opportunities, the breakthroughs did not come about until the 60s and then 70s and kind of exploded in the 80s and 90s.
60s, you came on the force in February of 1965. Chief Parks, did you know anything about the LAPD before you joined, sir?
You know, I was fully aware. I've been raised in Los Angeles, and really, see, I had a kind of interesting childhood. My father was a police officer, worked for the Harbor Department, so I really never viewed the police one way or another. It wasn't. I never had contact with them. We just knew that they were there. I remember being taken to Newton Station as a young person to show where you never wanted to go. I also remember just seeing police officers. I never had contact. I've never had a bad or good contact in the sense of just no contact through most of my childhood and teenage and high school days. But I have one, I think, remarkable memory, and it's just like yesterday, sitting at the corner of Adams and Western, and I was going northbound on Western, and I looked over and a police car was sitting next to me. It was the first time that I'd ever seen a black officer and a white officer in the same car. And it was so remarkable that I went home and told my parents. I said, guess what I just saw on Western Avenue? And they just kind of looked at me like, like, why did that draw your attention? But it was the first time I'd ever seen it. I mean, it was just kind of remarkable to see that, not even thinking about or ever visualizing you're going to be a police officer, but it certainly was a dramatic moment for me because I'd never seen that in all the time I was in Los Angeles.
Where were you, and where were you assigned during the 65 riots?
65 riot, I had just come from undercover work in narcotics. And so when I came out of undercover because of the riot, because we couldn't be on the street during that time, then I was basically inside for a while. And then once the riot had been basically stabilized, we did what we call our roundup. We went out and found all the suspects that had purchased drugs, and then I went out into Central Patrol. But it was a very eerie feeling to be driving around the city of LA and see military vehicles and cars on fire and buildings on fire. And it was very depressing 20 to 30 years later to see it in the early 90s that you never want to see that again. The first night, or the second night of the riot when I came back to work in the in the 90s, I drove down Central Avenue and could not believe the devastation of buildings after buildings, and going down Vermont and just seeing stores looted and buildings burned. In fact, it was more devastation in the 90s than it was in the 60s because it wasn't as localized. It was all over the city, tremendous amount of damage. But it was an eerie time to drive through the city streets, getting back and forth to work in the 60s with the riot going on, because you had this feeling also that you didn't want the National Guard or the police to mistake you as a rioter. And so I found that I drove around with my ID card, always ever present, so that if you got stopped, you can quickly show it without a whole lot of unnecessary movement.
In 1969, we had the shootout with the Black Panthers on Central Avenue. Where were you when that occurred?
In 69, I was, where was I in 69? 69, I was working Wilshire Detectives. And that was a kind of a funny deal. I worked Wilshire Detectives when I guess 69 was at Southwest, but I just ready to go to Wilshire Detectives. But what was funny, excuse me, we had a number of issues after that 69 shootout, but I was working patrol in Southwest. But what was funny after the 65 riot and then some of the issues that came about from the shootout, prior to 65, black officers, I guess, were integrated. We couldn't work with whites until 61. Then all of a sudden, after 65, black officers couldn't work with each other because there were so few. They wanted to spread them throughout the city. And then it wasn't until around the 70s they said, okay, it's okay if black officers can go back to working with each other. So we've gone through that. But that shootout of the Black Panthers was even more of a situation in which black officers, in my judgment, were suspect if they happened to kind of look like Black Panthers in the way they dressed and the way they spoke.
Is this an important story that we're sharing with our public?
Oh, I think it is. I think that, you can live in cities all over the nation and never have a contact with your park and rec and your street maintenance. There are not many cities you can live in without having some contact with the police department. And the police department sets a lot of policy decisions that your safety is a factor. It sends a message to communities as to whether it's safe enough to refurbish or rebuild or to invest in. And so it is a critical story because it impacts the community so much. Plus, LAPD has been in the forefront of law enforcement for so many years. There's so many firsts that we've had. First department with a lab, first department to have policing in the sense of helicopters, first department to have a SWAT unit, first department to do a variety of things that other departments have come here and replicated. So on the one hand, it's a historical place. On the other hand, we have our own struggles and we've had our own scandals and we've had those things that hopefully people have learned from. So it is a very important story because, as many people say, the city's health is based on how well LAPD functions.
Well, Chief Parks, I personally want to tell you, I think that you are a wonderful human being, a wonderful leader, and I'm behind you.
Thank you very much.
And at this time, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule because I know how busy and important you are to spend this time with us.
Thank you. I appreciate you doing the story, and we look forward to seeing it.
Well, thanks a lot, Chief.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.